Welcome to our second speaker now. We already heard something at the moment, like from the last talk about health and as well that, and we're just going on with that and just adding another topic, and that's AI. So Till is here. He worked for like big companies like T-Mobile, Monster, LinkedIn, and he already was there a pioneer taking all these digital topics, and he founded as well some startup, and his latest startup is called Artisense. They started 2 years ago, and they're deep into tech and AI, and I'm really happy that he's here today. So a big welcome, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Hi, what a great place to be today. Thanks for inviting me, and very happy to contribute. Society disrupted. I think that's a great topic. There's so much talk on digitalization. I'm kind of tired of it, but I think in this context it really makes sense to change perspective. A few words about me. Like we just heard, I've been kind of dealing with technology transformation quite a lot, so e-commerce in the early 2000s, social and business networking in 2003, 2006, 12, and just recently a deep tech startup as a spin-off of Technical University Munich around computer vision, which basically means helping machines see like humans. That's my background. So this topic here is about a conversation that I had with my father when I tried to explain to him what we're doing at Artisense. So we came to the field of AI, and we were discussing what is AI going to do in the future for mankind, for humanity, and so on, and what would be the limits. And we felt discussing the limits is probably best in a context where it's about what is actually the essence of humanity versus perfection of technology. And since my father has been a pastor, a Protestant minister, and even after he retired, he is still doing a lot of guidance for actual dying people. So he deals with death every day. He was putting this picture in and saying, could AI potentially become my successor in helping people at the end of their life? And I feel this is a really interesting perspective, because this is probably the context of extreme situation that you need to go over purely discussing AI as the next tool that will make things more efficient or will have access to even more data. So for me personally, I want to present something like an outline from this conversation. I don't really like these kind of visionary presentations where I pretend I know what's going to happen in 10 years, because nobody knows what happens in 10 years. I feel it's a bit more authentic. I'm also not a big fan of utopia or dystopia, because I think it's boring. And I feel this should be more a description of how we felt during the conversation, rather than talking about any facts, because I don't think there are a lot of facts in this field. So this is an outline of this conversation. What is the human context of this? So what is actually the essence of humanity in the context of this really extreme situation? Try to feel what it must feel when you are in your deathbed. Everything your rational mind has told you all along your life, all the kind of mechanics, all the kind of myths you've used to deal with a topic are basically exposed. They don't work anymore. You feel alone, you're starting to get panic, you're basically your anxiety takes over. So here the term menschliche Zuwendung, human attention, becomes really interesting, because that's one of the key themes in the field here. Some of the methods that pastoral guidance use here is, one, resonance. You try to put communication in front of the patient that creates an emotional resonance. A second method is mirroring, where you hear what people say and you try to give it back to them. So you're not presenting solutions to a patient, you're trying to help them find their own answers to the questions that pop up while they're leaving the planet. And the third one is reframing. You're taking this challenging and negative, and you try to reframe them, putting them into like a positive context. Have you thought about it this way? It could be more positive doing this. And then there is another interesting thought about the human context of the situation, which is, I think, best seen if you look at old paintings of people leaving. This is Saint Anne when she dies, and you can see how the artist has tried to put her into a, you could say, embedded situation. She's embedded into her social situation. You know, her old people are there, the kids are there where she can continue her lifeline. There is symbols for things, you know, religion puts their angels down to help her, all of these things. This person is getting a lot of help. And this is kind of the context, I feel, that's interesting in thinking what AI could actually do to support humans on their way out. So, sorry. So the next topic I want to cover here is what is the technology context for this? So what if AI had access to a lot of information? Because AI is basically algorithms combined with access to a lot of data. And if you think that AI could very easily, even though we just heard that access to data in medical is very difficult and regulated today, but in the future it might change. So if AI had access to all of the data from patients being treated, or access to data from people's lives, so the societal context, the historical context, have people been in wars, have people been in difficult family situations, what was their level of education, things like that. If AI had access to all of this data, what type of context and being embedded could it provide to people in this situation? What if AI had access to the cultural context? The myths that you learn, that you being prepared with. If you go to church every Sunday, what you learn about death, these things, it could basically reaffirm these types of, you could say, formats that society has or cultural context has created to help people die. And what if AI had even access to the medical environment, so it could combine whatever the doctor thinks has to happen to the patient with the information and the conversation that's going on. And if you then look at what is the kind of machine-human interface, that's kind of easy. I think we all know there's AR, VR, there's all kinds of audio that you can do. You can add music to create emotional reactions. You could connect to the medical machinery. All of that could be the man-machine interface. I think that's pretty easy to think. The technology part is not the challenge, I think, in this context. So, check. Ooh, very good. In the sense of what could this technology actually deliver? You could see the contextual information to do what we said earlier, reframing piece. So helping people feel embedded, getting whatever their questions are, getting answers out of the concept of their lifeline, out of the concept of their cultural environment, their family environment. That's something that AI could very likely deliver. By that, it could help stabilize patients which are in panic, who feel that they need answers, who feel that they're alone. I don't know, do you feel that would be possible? How does it feel? Possible? Not possible? Just who thinks that's possible? Half-half, okay. Very interesting. So out of the human context and the technology context, my father and I, we came to a couple of key questions. And the first key question that always came up with him was he felt frightened by the element of perfection in technology. He said, for some reason that doesn't feel right, because he sits next to these people and he feels, if I would be perfect, if I would be a perfect machine, I couldn't help this person. And I really struggled in the sense, in the course of this conversation, this was the thing that I struggled most with, because I felt, why? All of this information available, the perfect contextual data, analysis, prediction, information, content, why? That feels so good. It makes me feel warm and embedded, nice. But he said, no, there is an ambivalence around perfection. So if you think of how we are being prepared to die, there is the element of myth. I don't know if any of you read Levi Strauss in the 50s. He came up with this element, why is the myth helping us to deal with things that our brain simply can't understand? And death is one of these topics. Our brains are not wired to understand it. There's no way we can understand it. So we get these placeholder stories that make us believe we have an answer even though we don't really have an answer. And that becomes interesting in a situation where somebody feels, all of these things I've learned, they fail. They don't work. I got told God is with me in church every Sunday. Now I'm here. I'm alone. Where is he? He's not here. Or she is not here. So in that situation, this is really interesting to look at it this way. And if you look at what religion has actually been formed like, shaped like, to cover this, you could see that almost every world religion has an element where God comes down to earth and becomes man or woman. So Jesus basically came to earth mainly to die, so people can feel on eye level with him. So God is not just this perfect machine up there that always knows anything but is never there when you need them, but it appears so you can build a relationship. And a lot of people who are truly religious, they also have this kind of almost relationship with God that they feel as a person. And that's interesting because here there is an element of imperfection in the perfect thing. And this, to me now, as a takeaway, I want to take over to what would AI actually deliver in this context. So you could see that mankind, has always looked at, specific life events being a challenge and that being important. So the Spartans, they sent their kids to the mountains to survive, to prepare them for a very tough life. And if that is what's required for mankind to develop and to actually keep our society alive, then it might be a massive risk to reduce these challenges by adding technology. That's my first thought. So is it a good idea for people to remove these challenges out of their life path? Maybe not. It could become like a change to mankind even, or it could become a point where mankind doesn't develop anymore. So the next question is, could a personality shaped or powered by AI really do the job? At the end, I strongly believe what I learned was the perfection piece in technology is what will make a person, what would make me not trust this virtual personality, this avatar. Because eventually it's not about the perfect answer. It's not about getting a solution. It's about feeling understood. So having somebody who walks your last mile with you is what you need. And if it's an AI who has no understanding of your challenge, this is not going to help you. It's going to require the imperfection of a person that shares your fears, your panic, and knows how difficult it is, and sometimes doesn't have answers, so you feel you really have a companion who can walk with you the last mile. So I can only recommend to everybody who is interested into this to do it. A lot of people do this as freelancers, and they go to a hospice, and they basically are people who walk next to somebody who leaves the planet. It's a super interesting thing. So it not only is something that's required by people or that people need, it's also something that helps you yourself deal with this element that's going to come to you. All the best.
You will need that perhaps, or you don't need it. But thank you so much. So I think it's some really cool insight. I personally never thought of going that way and seeing it at this end, like seeing the difference. Cool.
All right.
So your time, 6 minutes. Are there any questions? Yeah.
Sure.
Just starting with one question. It's a very interesting concept. Is it something we have already incorporated? It would be really, really interesting.
I agree with you. It is basically just a conversation that I had with my father. And I felt it's something that I had kept with me because I felt after the conversation, this would be great if we could have taped it. It was almost a TED Talk, right? So why not? Let's talk about incorporating it. I'm open for new challenges. Okay. Why not? Any other questions? What do the Vikings think about death?
It's very philosophical, but I think it's very inspiring. And I have not given it a lot of thought, to be honest.
But that's the point. People don't think about it because in our Western societies, death is just removed so you don't have to deal with it. And once you get into the situation, you're alone. You don't have anything that helps you. And the idea is, could AI support? Because it could channel all the available cultural, relationship-wise information and content and give it to you in an intelligent way, which it feels great. But then would that really do the trick and basically replace a human that sits on my bed?
So what does your gut feeling say?
This, to me, was, out of the conversation, the most interesting thing, because I thought, this is perfect, right? The machine can even call my friends and say, hey, he's got 5 minutes, send him a message. That's really cool. But then at the end, I feel my father had a very valid point saying, perfection is in the wrong space here. It actually needs the imperfection of mankind, that you feel you have somebody, a companion who walks with you your last mile.
We actually have some things from I come from the University of Hamburg, and we are actually experiencing quite a few things, but we put pets into your digital pets into people who's lying and dying.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually gives them some quality. And also in dementia and diseases like that, we see a lot of new things coming up. They start singing, they start laughing, they actually start talking to other people around the table, although they've been sitting there for.
This is a whole, I mean, this whole topic could be continued for therapeutical, whatever, for treatment. But that's a different topic. For me, this was about the limits for AI in an extreme context of the essence of humanity. I agree with you, for tools, there's unlimited use cases. And I think it's very, very interesting because there is this need. I mean, research shows that the one driver for human happiness is deep human relationships. And as I said earlier, kids have virtual buddies. Their pets become personalities for them when they have challenges that they need to overcome. So there is a gray zone between real people and, you know, a puppet that can be filled potentially by a smart system.
Don't you think you have to build that earlier too? I mean, when somebody dies, he normally wants to have the people around him that have been there all their life. And if suddenly some AI steps in the last moment, are you familiar with Replica? It's also an app where you can, it's like a companion.
Mm-hmm.
So
No, I'm not.
if you establish that and you start like 10 years earlier, I think then it makes more sense.
In order to collect the data and make it more relevant, I understand that.
Build
Yeah.
more trust.
Yeah, this was a bit of a you know, assumption what would be possible in the future with access to data, personal data. If you look at the Cambridge Analytica, the psychology model, 5 different criteria, and if you give me access to your Facebook timeline, I know you better than your wife thing, then you could assume that this will be possible at some point in time. But clearly today it would require better condensation of data.
I also think it's very different from country to country, because here in Germany it was the first time when I registered in Munich that I had to cross out which religion I belong to.
Agreed.
In Denmark you never do that. And for example, when you drive into a German town, you see a picture of a church and when you can visit it. So here I think the church and the people of the church still play a very important and pragmatic role.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, in Denmark, when my father died, it was really out of the ordinary that the pastor came to our house and sat with him and talked to him. And I think you have these very different scenarios, but I still think it's really important that the people are there, the person, the humans are there.
That's actually, yeah.
But I think that, for example, in Denmark, that it might be a good idea with some kind of.
I agree with you, but it's interesting. Everything you can see 2 ways. We drove up in the train yesterday, and I worked on the agenda. And a woman sat next to me and looked into what we were discussing, and she started talking. It came out her fiance is dying from cancer, and she also brought up this topic that there is people, even in their closest friends, who have just basically shied away from walking the last mile because they also can't take this feeling. So there was one concern in the conversation that if we had these types of tools, it would be like in a home for elderly people, that people think, well, they are taken care of, we don't go anymore.